lot of people watch.
You know what I think about, Dan? I write about integrity a lot.
You do.
It seems to be in everything I do. And they all seem to be about how there's moral ambiguity that gives way to perfect moral clarity, and then what does the character do about it? That seems to be the thing that keeps drawing me back. It doesn't, I guess there's an ethical component to it, but I don't think of it that way.
Yeah.
It has to do with just integrity.
But I assume that because I think it comes out of, it comes out of who you are. You must be the type of person who thinks about integrity a lot in a personal way.
I do because I see what happens when people don't behave with integrity. The country just goes to hell. We watched it happen for 4 years. So it turns out that it's more than just a personal choice. It has to do with the fabric of humankind collectively. So it seems like an important thing to be paying attention to.
It sure is, and it gives more substance to something that might be just seen as a thriller or whatever. It's every scene is causing you to think deeper, and especially when the bad guys aren't all, I'll let them ask these questions, but when the bad guys aren't strictly bad, but you see some humanity in them, but then you also see, when it's not so black and white, and there's a lot of ambiguity.
You start with a fundamental assumption. If you don't mind, if I just do like a 2-minute thing on screenwriting, is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Screenwriting is an intellectual exercise that's designed to elicit an emotional response. In other words, you want to do the thinking so that your audience can do the feeling. If you think about the movies that you love the most, they made you feel something. They made you root. You cared. Oh my God, I hope Rocky wins the fight. Oh my God, I hope Chief Brody catches the shark, etc. If I write a script and someone calls me and says, oh my God, this is the smartest script I've ever read, I have failed 100%.
Right.
Because I'm reaching them here and not here. And that's not the game. The game is all about emotion. On top of my computer, on the monitor, right to the left of the camera that I'm looking at right now, in big block letters, it says, what is the simple emotional journey? When I'm stuck, I don't ask myself, well, what would be cool here? I ask myself, what is the simple emotional journey? What am I trying to say? There's no place like home. Okay, I'll go write a scene that says there's no place like home. Love conquers all. Okay, great. Let me go write a scene that says love conquers all. But these are emotional ideas.
Absolutely.
So you want to keep getting back to that as a primer. But to get back to your point about how it impacts character.
Okay.
The way that it impacts character, and it's why integrity is such an important theme, I think. Your main character, your protagonist, your hero, has to have 2 problems. This is central to every screenplay, every movie you've ever seen. They have an external problem. They have something outside themselves that they have to fix. They have to catch a killer, they have to catch a shark, they have to put out a fire, etc. Okay? But then they have an internal problem. They have something about them that's broken that only your movie can fix. Their attention is on this outside problem. They are completely unaware of the internal evolution that's going on during the course of the movie. If you were to stop Clarice Starling in the middle of Silence of the Lambs and say, what are you doing? She'd say, I'm trying to stop a serial killer. She would not say, I'm working through my dad issues, and it turns out I'm really screwed up about lambs, and I'm working my way through that. She's unaware that that's happening, and yet that's the actual story that we're watching. You want to create for your characters such a great external problem that they're completely distracted by it, right? Like Chief Brody thinks he's just catching a shark. He's not aware that he's working through his fear of the water. And at the end of the movie, if you've done it correctly, as they're solving the external problem, they've solved the internal problem, and then you're done. But it's the solving of the internal problem that's actually what's satisfying emotionally.
That's right. We're about to shoot.
Character and story are the same thing. Anyone that tells you that they're different is incorrect. Your character is your story, and your story is your character's growth.
I think that's a great thing to remember. We're about to shoot these courtroom scenes, and most of you are playing witnesses being sort of drilled in a courtroom. And to remember that, I guess, would you say, Billy, then the external would be, you're on trial. So that's your conflict that you're trying to clear your name or whatever. But the internal is different. The internal
Well, think of it this way. I don't know if any of you got a chance to see the Comey Rule. It's a limited series that I just made for Showtime. And there are a lot of scenes in the Comey Rule in which a bunch of FBI agents are sitting in a room debating what to do. And there's a huge informational load in those scenes. And yet, forgive me for saying this about my own work, they're not boring. And the reason that they're not boring is because I had great actors. And what those actors made sure they were doing is they had a point of view about everything. No matter what was being discussed, they had an opinion about it, and they were passionate. And the reason that that elevates the material is because it stops being information at that point, and it starts being intention. It starts being emotion. So what I would say to anyone who's playing a character who's going to be on the stand is I only have one directing rule, literally one. Which is I never give an actor an adjective. I always give them a verb. And the reason that I do that is because actors, forgive me, are by their nature self-involved. Sorry, that's just a fact. I love my actors, but that is the truth, okay?
Not wrong. Yep.
If I go up to a woman, an actress, and I give them an adjective like be sexy, she's gonna go into her head immediately, like, am I not sexy? Does he not think I'm sexy? How do I look sexy? How do I make him think I'm sexy?
Mm-hmm.
She's going to be so in her head, the jaws of life could not get her out. Okay. But if I go up to that same actress and I say, punish him, ignore him, seduce him, tease him, whatever, I just give her a verb. I give her an intention. Now, to get what she wants from me, which is a pat on the head, say good performance, she's got to take her attention off herself and put it on the other actor to get a result from him. Now she's working. Sorry about my phone. Now she's working on that other actor.
That's right.
And that makes her alive in the scene. So what I would say to any actor who's playing a courtroom scene or any scene is make sure you're not in here playing an emotion. Sad, scared, angry, bullshit, okay? Make sure you're playing an intention. Your intention is, pick juror number 3. I'm going to make that guy think I'm sexy.
Mm-hmm.
Or pick the defendant. I'm going to make sure that person knows that I've got their back. Or pick the person who's cross-examining you. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to belittle you. Whatever the dialogue will allow you to do. And then you're playing the emotion and you're not playing the words. You just, because on a set, I never talk to my actors about dialogue. I'm constantly talking to my actors about what the dialogue means. What's the intention there? And I'm constantly saying to my actors, are you winning? Are you getting what you want? If not, you better try another gear. And so it's always about intention. There was the very first time I directed, I was working on a movie called Shattered Glass, which I had written, and I was directing it. And there was an actor named Hayden Christensen, young actor, and we disagreed about everything. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is we would talk, and then I would get the scene lit. I would get the actors in place. I would get the camera ready. And literally, as they were saying, okay, speed, sound, etc., I would say to Hayden, do you know what you want? He'd say yes. I said, go get it. Action. So the last thing I could do before we actually started rolling was make sure he was working off of an intention. And that's what I would say to any actor about any scene.
Okay, that's what we're going to be doing next weekend, guys. That's a great tip. Keep that in mind. Next weekend. Okay, Joseph, you're up. You've got a question about Breach and its perspective.
Yes, Breach was told through the eyes of the young agent, Eric O'Neill, rather than from Robert Hansen's perspective. How was the decision made to go with this point of view?
Okay, again, go back to that idea that movies are supposed to elicit an emotional response. If you tell the story of Robert Hansen from Robert Hansen's point of view, it's going to be difficult for the audience to become engaged because he turns out to be kind of a monster. And I don't want people slitting their wrists at the end of the movie. I want them to feel some hope. So the way into the story of Robert Hansen was about this young kid who caught him. And by the way, I don't want to go too deep into Breach because most people haven't seen it, but just so you know, when I saw the first cut of Breach, which was the first studio movie I ever directed, the lights came up and my editor said, what did you think? And I said, well, it's very clear I should never be allowed to direct another movie again. That is just crap. That is just horrible. And I felt pretty bad. So we went to lunch, and my editor, who's the smartest film guy I've ever been around, said to me, what do you think the movie's about? And I said, well, I think what the movie's about is how the Ryan Phillippe character, because he's stuck in a room with the Chris Cooper character,
Yeah.
he's forced to ask himself, how do I really feel about my career, my marriage, and my faith? That's what the movie's about. He said, okay, let's go cut that movie. And so we did. We started cutting out everything that wasn't that movie. And within a week, I loved the movie. Which brings me back to something that's sort of seminal if you're going to write, but just as seminal if you're going to direct or if you're going to act. You know how to do the sculpture of an elephant. You start with a block of granite and you chip away everything that's not an elephant, right? Is there any other way to do it? You can't just build the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you're writing, you're kind of barfing out a bunch of ideas and then you step back. Okay, that's my block of granite. What's the story I'm telling? Okay, the story I'm telling is the rich get away with murder. Okay, everything that's not conspiring to tell that story comes out. When you are directing, that's the first cut of your movie. It's a big block of granite. You got to find the elephant in there. And when you're acting, it's the same thing. You have a million different ideas, right? Because people are complex and idiosyncratic and they have a lot of things going on at once. But what's the simple idea that you want to communicate? The simple emotional idea. I envy that person. Okay, then let's strip away everything else and let's play that. Very tough to play more than one thing at once. And so you want to keep thinking about the simplest emotional idea and then conveying it.
That's great. Okay, Carrie, you're up. Carrie Perkins-Schnicker.
Hi. First, I would just want to thank you so much for taking time to do this for us. You'll never know how much it means to all of us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And I think you kind of touched a little bit on my question already. My question is, as a director doing the really intense scenes and doing so many takes, how do you keep the actors in that right headspace and keep the intensity up while you're filming?
Great question. Great question. The first thing is on the movies that I tend to make, we don't have an unlimited budget. So I'm not going to be in there for 15, 16 takes. It almost never happens. And secondly, if you've done the work before you start shooting, your actors don't need that many takes. On a shoot like the Comey Rule, very rare we got to take 6 or 7. Very rare. Because you had done the work. The motto that I give to myself is I'm not talented enough to be unprepared. So I want to make sure that my actors know what I'm looking for before I say action. But let's just say we get to a place where somebody's lost. You want to say something to every actor after every take. You want to be positive and you want to be Socratic. For example, if someone is, hamming it up and overacting and just chewing on the scenery, you don't want to belittle them and say, stop being such a ham. You want to say, don't be afraid to do less. I've got your face 40 feet wide. Don't worry, I'm going to see everything you do. You don't need to play to the back row. I gotcha. Okay, that relaxes an actor. They know that you are seeing them. But again, it's always about intention. If it's not cooking, you need to go up to that actor and say, what are you trying to do here? Like, what's your intention? I understand that the line is, I love you, but let's just assume that it doesn't mean I love you. Can we try it where it means I hate you? Can we try it where it means I'm scared? Can we try it where it means I'm lonely? Can we try it where it means I'm bored? Let's just see what happens. And then you're shaking things up a little bit because you're letting them know that it's not the words that you want them lost in. It's the intentions that matter to you. That's what's really important there. I remember the first time that I ever met Julia Roberts, who I was lucky enough to work with. It was our initial meeting. I was so nervous. I was physically ill before we sat down. But I said to her, how do you like to work? Do you like a lot of rehearsal? Do you like a lot of takes? What directorial styles have worked particularly well or particularly badly for you? And she said to me, well, my feeling is if we get to take 5, one of us doesn't know what he's doing. And I thought that was pretty amazing. So I made a mental note to myself, okay, no 5th take with Julia, got it. And I was very, very able to stay within the confines of that. She's a brilliant actress, so that made it easy. But you want to keep talking to your actors. You want to keep changing things up. If you find that you're giving the same direction over and over again and they're not getting it, it's probably shitty direction. So you need to find another way to go. I'll give you an example. It happens to be from Breach, but you don't have to know the movie.
And by the way, I'll just tell you, everyone here does. I think everyone watched Breach.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so there's a scene where Ryan Phillippe is having an argument with his wife, who's played by Caroline Deverna, wonderful French-Canadian actress. And no matter what I was doing, there, it's the scene in their apartment. And no matter what I was doing, it just wasn't cooking. It was fine. It was passable, but it just didn't have that interior life that made you say, okay, we can move on now. We got the scene. And I had tried every verb in the world with her and just none of it felt freighted enough. So I went up to her in between takes and I said, can you do me a favor? She said, sure. I said, you're East German. The character she's playing, Katerina, is East German. I said, so if this fight goes as bad as it's going and you guys split up, what from this apartment are you taking? Do you get the TV? Like, do you get the books? Are you moving into a hotel? Are you flying home? What are you doing? Because I've had fights with my wife that are so bad that I'm literally, as my mouth is moving, I'm thinking, where am I sleeping tonight? Like, this is blowout time. And the scene was amazing. She connected to that as a reality. I don't know if she fixated on a TV or a book or whatever, but she started to play like, this is the end of my marriage. And then we moved on. Well, I'm not a genius. It took me 5 takes to figure out that was the button I had to push with that particular actress on that particular day. But as a director, you better be ready to push new buttons. If you're giving the same direction and it's not working, it's you, it's not them.
That's great. Okay, Mike, you've got a question about bad guys.
Hi, thanks for this once in a lifetime opportunity. My question, I think you've already answered, but let me ask it. When writing the bad guy, is making them likable a goal, or is the aim to be impartial and shoot for truth and realism? And then a follow-up, and how should actors approach playing an antagonist? Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, say that again?
How should actors approach playing
okay.
a bad guy antagonist?
Sure,
Thanks so
okay.
much.
Well, the first is I never try to make a bad guy likable. I try to make a bad guy comprehensible. I try to make them knowable. I try to give them human behavior because that's what an actor can play. When I pitched Captain Phillips, Captain Phillips was still on the boat when Sony decided to buy the rights to his story, and they said, okay, well, this is going to be an open writing assignment. In other words, I'm at a point in my career happily where when people offer me stuff, I get it exclusively. Like someone will say, this is yours for a week to decide whether or not you want to write it. You don't have to compete with other writers to get it. I worked really hard to get to that place. Captain Phillips wasn't going to be that. Captain Phillips was going to be a beauty pageant. Like a lot of writers were going to come in and pitch for that gig. So I had to ask myself, do I want to take that risk? Because at this point in my career, if I take that risk and I don't get it, it hurts my brand. But I really, really wanted Captain Phillips because it was an action movie that a true story that laid out like an action movie. Okay, this is going to be an answer to your question, I promise. So then I thought to myself, okay, what actually happens narratively in Captain Phillips? Well, narratively, a white guy is kidnapped by 4 black guys and 3 of them get their heads blown off. And I thought, not only is that not a movie I want to write, that's not even a movie I want to see. I mean, that just sounds fucking horrible. So when I went in and pitched, I had to find a different twist on it. And the twist that I pitched was, this is a movie about leadership. It's about 2 captains who live across the world from each other. And they get up in the morning and they get dressed and they go to work. And their jobs put them on a collision course. And under pressure, we're going to find out that one of these captains would sacrifice himself to save his men, and the other captain would sacrifice his men to save himself. And that's the movie. And that is the movie. But my point is that that idea of 2 captains getting dressed and going to work, that's something that the guy who's playing the lead Somali pirate, he can play that. He didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do something evil today. He woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to go do my job. From his perspective, his job is Somali piracy. right? Okay. Hitler did not wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to do something evil today. He was a delusional, insane, hateful person who believed, had convinced himself he was doing something that was for the benefit of the German people. Okay. Turns out he was extremely wrong, and we all paid a price for it. But my point is, even the rioters who went to the Capitol on January 6th believed they were patriots. They were, again, misinformed and delusional, but they believed their president said to them, this is an act of patriotism. Right. When Glenn Close is in Fatal Attraction, one of the greatest bad guy performances of all time, from her perspective, she's right. From her perspective, it's, wait a minute, you sleep with me all weekend, you never call me again, I get pregnant, and I'm supposed to blow it off? Fuck you. Right. Now she takes it to bunny boiling, which is a little out of control. But the point is, she's not stepping outside herself and judging the character. When I first showed the final cut of Breach to Chris Cooper, I was so nervous that day. We were on the lot at Universal. I couldn't sit in the room while he was watching it. I literally brought shorts and running shoes that day. And while he was watching the movie, I went for a run on the Universal backlot. I was running circles around Jaws. I'm not kidding. Okay. And then I found a shower on the lot, and I showered, and I came back in, and it timed out right. And the lights came up. And the first thing he said to me was, I had no idea that was such a dark character. He played the guy.
Wow.
But he wasn't playing him like a villain. He never once came up to me and said, should I be scarier here? When Brendan Gleeson played Trump for me, he never once came up to me and said, let's make a joke out of this. Let's make fun of Trump. No, you don't want your actors stepping outside themselves and judging their own character. From Trump's perspective, Trump is right.
Right.
So, and that's the fun of it, is watching someone who is so entirely wrong, believing he's so entirely right. So that would be my my challenge to any actor who's playing someone that we call a bad guy, is to say, where are you right? And to talk to them about their point of view. You know, there's a scene in the Comey Rule that I'm particularly proud of. It's the loyalty dinner. It's where Comey and Trump sit down opposite each other for dinner. And we had talked a lot about that scene. By the way, it was the only scene, it was the only day of our 51-day shoot where James Comey was there. I had invited him to the set that day to watch that one because it was so important to the movie. But what I basically said to Brendan Gleeson playing Trump, I said, bully him. Anywhere you can, bully him. And then I said to Jeff Daniels, whatever you do, don't get bullied. And you get that.
That's great.
Does that answer your question?
All right, Jeannie, you're up.
Yes, hello, and thank you so much. In a 2007 NPR interview that you did, you mentioned that you liked what you called the challenge of uninteresting places. You recall that, like the FBI settings, for example, in Breach, the halls, the fluorescent lighting, everything being plain. And so Eric's office is this blank white space, but the door closes with this really depressing thunk, like a vault. It goes clunk. And Hanson's office has this warm tone of wood going on in the background, but it's very austere. Yet when he pours water out of a plastic pitcher, it's in a crystal glass that looks like Waterford, you know, really expensive crystal. Mm-hmm. And when Eric leaves his dad's house, his dad's just in a suit with the briefcase and everything, but there's this incongruous steel tractor seat next to the front door, like decor in this posh neighborhood. So when you're writing, do you envision these scene details, these incongruities as a whole as you write the character, or do you go back later? Is that a separate task for writers? And do you change your mind as you go, or what? How do you make that fit with those characters in those scenes?
That's a great question, and thank you for paying such close attention to detail. That makes directors really happy. The answer is sometimes you're thinking about those details when you're writing the scenes. In the case that you mentioned, I did not specifically mention the Waterford-looking glass. I was trying to communicate a feeling, but part of the goal of directing is to surround yourself with people that are more talented than you are and bring out their best, right? Inspire them to the place where they do the best work of their lives and they're bringing you amazing options. So I had this incredible production designer on Breach named Wynn Thomas, who became a close friend. And he was throwing ideas at me like, well, what if the glass looked like this? Yes, great idea. And what if the picture looked like this? Yes, fantastic idea. And what I found was, if the surroundings were dull enough, the stuff that you put foreground was really going to catch people's eye. You look for details like the glass because the rest of the room is nothing to look at. And that turned out to be really, really critical. I don't remember where the detail of the tractor seat came from. I'm sure it wasn't from me. Wynn is just amazing. There are times where you get far enough into the process where you're in pre-production where you start to call for details like that in the script, just because you become more alive with little stuff because the big stuff feels solved. But there are times where someone surprises you on the set with something and it's either exactly right or exactly wrong. What it all comes down to is that same idea of the elephant in the block of granite. In other words, whether you're writing, directing, or acting, you should constantly be asking yourself, what is the story I'm telling? What is this thing about? Because that dictates every choice. If you're directing and someone says, do you want this shirt blue or do you want this shirt yellow? There's actually a process by which you can arrive at the correct answer, which is, okay, if it's blue, how does it affect this beat, this character, this scene, this sequence, this act, and the script? Oh, no, it really should be yellow. There was a point in one movie where I knew I wanted a woman in a red dress at the end of that movie, and I wanted that red dress to pop. I took red out of everywhere else in the movie. Literally, no one was allowed to show me anything that had red in it for the entire movie, just so that red dress would pop. Like, you start to think about sort of all the elements of movie making conspiring, so that you just keep driving towards telling this one story. Sometimes that's really big picture stuff. Sometimes that's really detailed stuff. But on a set, you're paying attention to everything. And I'm the guy who walks on a movie set. If it's a character's apartment, I start rearranging the books, how I want them to look. I've done that a zillion times. I'm very, very focused on stuff because I don't want to be distracted unless I want to be distracted. In other words, if I want to call attention to something, I'm going to call attention to something. And you can hit it with a certain light or make sure the character is standing in such a way that you can see it. You can frame it up. You can make the scene about anything you want. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. And with Hansen, it seemed that, with all these austere things being part of Opus Dei, all this stuff that he was making important in his life, that Waterford crystal glass just really hit me. It's like, no, this guy's got money, and this is the only thing in his office that's given the clue that he likes. He's out for the good stuff, but he hides it really well. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Sir.
well, it just so happens that character, he had a weird thing about water. Water was really important to him. Filling up his pitcher was really important to him. He would never send anyone to do that for him. There are all kinds of weird idiosyncrasies about Hansen that I just particularly loved. And also, that kind of stuff is just magic for an actor. When you give them tangible stuff, you have in prep, you have a thing called a prop show, where all the props are laid out in front of you and you're choosing, no, he'd have this gun, no, he'd have this wallet, no, he'd have this watch, no, he'd have this badge. I invite the actor to that stuff. I want them to own those details. Like, Chris Cooper helped me pick the weird zip up briefcase that character has, because I want them to feel it. And they do. If you make stuff like that real, it absolutely impacts performance.
That's great. Okay, Karen Reynolds, you're up.
All right. Hi, thank you. It says I'm muted.
Nope.
Am I
Oh, you're not muted. I hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Exposition is tough to write and a challenge to act. Is that why you had Robert Hansen play the game of bluff with Eric? Was it a way to give the audience the backstory?
It can be. What I find with most inexperienced writers is they tend to barf out all their exposition in the first act. because they're afraid of having the audience not know what the hell's going on. When the fact is, exposition is ammunition, and you only use it when you have to. I'll give you a great example. One of the greatest screenplays ever written, Chinatown. Imagine a world in which the writer lost his confidence and decided to tell you in the first act, oh yeah, Faye Dunaway, she had sex with her father once, so that her daughter is actually her sister. Imagine that, as opposed to saving it for the end of the movie. Like, that takes real restraint as a writer, but think about how valuable that was, how powerful it was that they saved it. So you want to be able to save stuff till the end, and you want to trust your audience a little bit. One of the things about Breach or Shattered Glass or almost anything I've ever done is you find out really big stuff about your lead character and the person that they're most intimate with deep into the movie. That's what gives it its power, I think.
That's a great tip. Speaking of endings, Gloria, you have a question about the ending of Breach.
You're muted, Gloria.
Gloria?
There we go.
You hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Billy. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
In Breach, the ending of the movie just totally blew me away after Eric made his decision to leave the FBI, and he gets to the elevator and the doors open and there he is face to face with Robert Hansen. That was just a wow moment for me. And it's really one of my favorite movie endings now of all time. I'm curious, did that actually happen as part of the story, or did you write that for dramatic effect that worked?
No, I had to write that one.
Did you?
That is my tip of the cap to Kramer versus Kramer, which won Best Picture in 1979. Ends in an elevator scene, one of the great elevator scene endings of all time. Picasso said, "Good artists borrow and great artists steal." And I endeavor to be a great artist, so I absolutely stole that ending. But I will tell you, so the story of that ending is, it is one of the very, very few times on any movie I've ever worked on where we got to take 16. And take 16 is the one that's in the movie. And the reason was Chris Cooper, who is spectacular in that part, he just didn't quite go to the bottom of his soul in the first 15 takes. And then on take 16, he did. And it was one of the very, very few times I've ever in my career had an entire crew stop and applaud after I said cut. They knew the second he did it, that was just money that was going in the movie, and then we moved on. I happen to love that ending. I think elevators are really dramatic, metaphorical places. And it also, it's the whole point of the movie, that he says, "Pray for me," and Eric O'Neill says, "I will." They did have a weird bond around religion, and part of religion is about compassion, even for people who have done terrible things, and forgiveness. And so that was, for me, you couldn't end that movie any other way.
Right. That's great.
It was
Tim,
thrilling.
okay. Tim, you have a question about writing things that you end up directing. So go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I want to know if even before you wrote Breach, Shattered Glass, Secret in Their Eyes, and a couple TV shows, that you would also be directing them. Did you know that before you wrote? And if so, did that affect your writing in any way?
Shattered Glass, no. Shattered Glass, I had not yet become a director, and I was at a point where I thought that writers who talked about wanting to be directors were annoying. The reason that I chose to direct Shattered Glass, or chose to pursue directing Shattered Glass, was I was on the set of another movie that I had written, and we were shooting in Prague in January. I don't know if you've ever been to Prague in January, but it's crazy cold. And we were shooting an exterior, and everybody on the set was freezing their ass off. And as the screenwriter, I was sitting in a trailer, which was heated, and I was comfortable as hell. And I thought, something's wrong about this. Like, I don't think I have as much skin in the game as everybody else. And it wasn't like I need to go suffer for my art. It wasn't that. It was just, am I a grown-up or not? When you are a screenwriter, you always have the director to protect you from all kinds of criticism on a movie. You can always say, look, director's medium. And that was kind of a dodge. So I decided that Shattered Glass made sense as a first thing to try to direct because it had no car chases, nothing blew up, nobody shot anybody, nobody was naked. It had none of those craft-driven things that I knew I had no idea how to do. It was just, can you get tone, can you get performance, or can't you? And it turns out I felt I could. So from that point on, there were certain things that I wrote to direct. Breach, Secret in Their Eyes, Last Tycoon, Comey Rule, those were all written for me to direct. But that's because they were things I felt I was capable of directing. You know, the movie is the baby. And when you write something, what you should want is for the best director possible to be articulating that script. If you don't think you're the best director possible, then you shouldn't want to direct it. In other words, Paul Greengrass is a better idea for Captain Phillips than I am. Clint Eastwood was a better idea for Richard Jewell than I was. I thought I was the right idea for Breach. I thought I was the right idea for Comey Rule. And I couldn't name anybody that I thought, no, that person will bring something to it that I don't know how to do. So that is informed by a number of things. I think I have a pretty limited set of visual skills, right? Like there are shots in Moulin Rouge that I can't even explain, much less duplicate. So no, I'm not the right director for something like that. But for something like this, that I feel like my visual skill set actually fits, then yeah, I think I'm the right person to do that. What I will tell you is when I'm writing something that I'm not going to be directing, I will put bigger scenes in there for sure, because some other asshole has to go direct it. It's not my problem. So I will write big blown out action scenes. Great, have a good time. Okay.
Yeah, it's not your
All the
problem.
pirates on a ship climbing up, fire. Great, have fun. I'll be here because I don't have to direct it.
Exactly. Angelique, you're up.
Hello there, Billy. My question is related to more or less the content of the films that you do. And I always wonder, what is the difference between a movie that's based on true events as opposed to based on a true story? And what permissions are needed before you actually film?
Well, that's a great question, and that depends. If someone is in the public eye, they don't have a lot of rights to stop you.
Oh, okay.
For example, I don't need Donald Trump to sign a waiver for me to depict that character. I don't have to. I didn't need to get the rights of Robert Hansen. He had sacrificed those rights by breaking the law. I didn't need to get the rights to Stephen Glass when I made Shattered Glass. But I needed to get the rights to some of the people that were around him, or I had to composite characters and change names, which sometimes you just have to do. For the most part, in true stories, people don't generally hassle you about it. You know, when I think about Richard Jewell, you know, Richard had passed away, but I had the participation of his mother. I had the participation of Watson Bryant, who was the Sam Rockwell character. And no one else really challenged me until the film was being released, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution felt that we had gotten one thing wrong in the movie and decided to just torpedo the movie as a result of it. I wish that had been handled a little differently.
Yeah.
And by the way, when Clint was going to shoot that movie, I wrote him a draft in which we changed the name of the Olivia Wilde character just to inoculate us from that problem, but they chose to use her real name.
But the other part, Billy, what's the difference between a movie that is, that one, yeah.
Okay, so based on true events and based on a true story, to me, they're the same thing. I don't think there's a term of art in there that's different. Sometimes a studio will quibble over based on a true story versus inspired by true events. I think they think there's sort of a lower bar to hit if you're saying inspired by. My personal feeling is you have to be true to the spirit of something. If you are true to the spirit of something, you can get away with lots of details that can be altered. I think that's fair game. But you can't say someone was a terrible person if they were actually a good person. you can't insinuate that they were looking at child porn if they weren't, right? So based on still protects people from being vilified in a way that's inaccurate. And of course, the truth is always the defense. You know, one thing about the Comey rule that was really gratifying for all of us is that we took some real shots at real people and nobody challenged the veracity of anything we said in the movie. No one who lived that story said they got it wrong, because we didn't. We absolutely got it right.
Speaking of Comey rule, Allie, you have a question about James Comey.
So you've already said that James Comey was only on set for one day, but
Mhm.
how involved was he in the filming? And if he wasn't involved at all except for that one day, would you have liked him to have been more involved, or was he involved too much in your opinion?
He was involved the exact right amount. He was very involved in prep, very involved. I'll tell you a funny story about Comey. I had been dying to write something about the Trump administration. I took those 4 years so personally. And I was looking for the right vehicle. And one day this producer named Shane Salerno called me and said, "Do you want to adapt Comey's book?" I said, "Oh my God, send it to me." This was the day before it published. So he sent me the book and I read it overnight. And I called him and I said, I'm in. I said, the first 172 pages of this book are kind of useless to me, but everything after that, I'm in. And I said, to me, this is a love story between a man and an institution. And everything he does is in defense of that institution. He said, okay, great. So I still had to get over the barrier of getting Comey to sign off on me, because Comey had, the right to refuse a screenwriter. So I was going to have to audition for him, and it was going to have to be on the phone, not in person, which was a drag. I much prefer to do that in person. So a call was set up with me, where I'm sitting right now, and Shane Salerno in his office in LA, and Comey in Virginia. And he had 2 book agents in DC and 2 more book agents in New York. So we're all on this conference call. And for the first 10 minutes, I'm just killing it. Like everything I'm saying, he loves. And then one of his agents said, well, how are you going to handle the Hillary email thing? I said, well, we got to take it head on. I mean, I don't want to write an unflawed character. And I said, dramatically, this is Frankenstein. You created the monster and the monster destroys you. And Comey said, how did I create the monster? I said, well, sir, you got him elected. And there was this pause. And unbeknownst to me, Shane, who wanted me to get the job, Shane was emailing me saying, stop fucking saying he got Trump elected. But I didn't have my email open at the moment. So Comey says, well, there were other factors. I said, that may be, sir, but you created a 6-point swing, and that was enough. And Comey picked me anyway. That's not a story about me. That's a story about Comey. Given those same circumstances, I wouldn't have hired me to write that screenplay. Someone who I knew was going to be critical of me, I would not have picked me, but he did. And in the year and a half that I worked with him, he had a million chances to manipulate me, to bully me, to withdraw from me, to try to body language me into some version of, hey, I really look like an idiot in that scene. Can you help me? He never once did. Never, ever, ever. The only thing that he ever gave me was, this happened, and here's how it happened. And we were, I was firing off a million different questions to him. Before I even started writing, I sent 150 questionnaire to him, just so I could basically understand who he was. And this was questions about, what did you think about this particular thing happening at the FBI? And it was also questions about, like, do you own a pair of jeans? Because I just couldn't picture him in jeans. I asked him what he was good at cooking. What does his wife like to cook? What's his favorite sports team? Like that kind of stuff, just so I could understand the guy a little bit. And I asked him, how gossipy is the FBI, and are there cliques, and how does that work? And what's the relationship between the Washington field office and the Washington headquarters, and all that stuff. He was great. The reason that we only had him on the set one day is because he's busy. And sitting on a set is boring your second day. It's really boring unless you're directing the movie. So I only wanted him there once, and I wanted him there for that one particular day. And I can't say enough about the guy. I just love him. It was an absolute privilege to tell his story.
That's great. Jeannie, you had another question about Comey Rule while we're on that subject.
Yeah, well, we're on that subject, and actually, I was thinking about Hunger Games too at that point, because in one interview, you said with Hunger Games you were attracted to it because, you couldn't believe that a government would treat its people that way.
Yes.
And you've often said in other interviews that you're drawn to these stories of moral ambiguity, and you said in an interview with Frank Buckley, stories that say something about my country.
Mhm.
And you said the Comey Rule was the first time you made a film for your country.
True.
So how has that experience with the Comey Rule and that particular intensity of purpose likely to affect your screenwriting choices in future, in more
Well, the
active
answer is
ways?
it affects them profoundly. In the same way that Germany is still making movies about the Holocaust, 70 years later, that country, 80 years later, that country is still trying to figure out what was the meaning of that event? Like, how did that happen? I believe that America is going to be unpacking the Trump years for decades to come. I truly believe that. I think we are going to be asking ourselves, how did we let this happen? And what does it say about us for a long time? And I want to be part of that conversation. I have a lot to say about it. And the Comey Rule is the first thing that I was offering to my country, but not the last. I can't tell you yet the thing that I'm doing next, but it is going to be right in the bullseye of what those Trump years actually resulted in, and what the meaning of that could possibly be. Before I was a writer or a director, I was an American, and it means an enormous amount to me. I didn't know how much democracy meant to me until somebody tried to take it away. And it turns out that it means the world. I don't think Americans understand how close we came on January 6th to seeing lynchings on television, lynchings of lawmakers, because what the intentions of those militia members who were inside our Capitol were, the plan was to capture Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence and put them on trial in the Capitol and then pass sentence. That's what we all would have been watching had that gone just a little more shithouse than it did. So yeah, I have a lot to say about that. And I think I'm going to be saying it for the next little while.
That's a great answer, Billy. Do you have time for 2 more questions, or are you?
Whatever you want.
Okay, Dennis, go for it. Make sure you unmute yourself, Dennis. Is it not working?
Dennis, are you muted? Dennis, I think you're still muted.
See that little mute button?
There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, sir. I love all your refrigerator magnets.
Billy, first of all, appreciate you doing this. It's a pleasure. My question is, for older actors breaking into the business, what are your thoughts on that? And are there any opportunities for us?
Of course there are opportunities. It's harder. You already know that. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. Here's the thing I would say about that. There are so many variables that are going to affect your career over which you have no control, right? And yet they're real. Like, you can't control whether or not there's going to be a pandemic. You can't control the health of our economy or the health of our industry. You can't control whether superhero movies are in or out. Like, those are things that are beyond your control. There's only one variable over which you have any control, which is your willingness to work hard. So you better maximize that variable. Don't let anybody out hustle you. Don't let anybody outwork you. Don't sit around at Starbucks for 2 hours waiting for your muse to land on your shoulder and tell you to go do something brilliant. Just get better. It's tough in a pandemic, but keep working on your craft. Try to get better at being an actor every single day. There are parts for white males your age. Absolutely, 100%, they exist. And in a world in which there are 400, streamers out there, there's a lot of production that is going to be ramping up, I would say, in the next 3-4 months, as people get inoculated and start to go back to shooting again. I can already see it starting to happen out here. So yeah, you're going to have opportunities, but your opportunity must meet your preparedness. You got to be ready. So are you doing something every day to get better? I am. I'm at my desk at 8 every morning, and I'm, at 1 o'clock, I take a break to go feed myself, and I'm back at the desk at 1:15, and I go till 6. And I'm not surfing the web, and I'm not gambling online, and I'm not, trying to find ex-girlfriends on Facebook. I'm not doing anything but working, because there's a mountaintop I'm trying to get to, and I'm not close to it. I can see it from here, but I'm not close to it. And only hard work will get me there. So here's one thing that I want to say to all of you. And it doesn't matter if you're, 100 or 6. There is nobody in the world that has your pain, your history, your insight, your humor, your talent, your knowledge. There's no one else but you that has all those things. There are scripts you can write that I can't write because I don't have those things. There are parts you can play that the person in the box next to you cannot play. So as much as the business tries to beat you down and tell you that you are without value, there is a performance out there that only you can give. And you just got to keep telling yourself that. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter. Christopher Plummer, who died yesterday, was kicking ass into his 90s. Donald Sutherland was 94 and still getting nominated for Golden Globes. Just doesn't matter how old you are. Be the best actor you can be today.
That's great advice. Okay, Ken, close us out with your last question. It's about it's an acting question.
Okay. Do you have different expectations from actors if they're playing true life people versus if they're playing fictional people?
No. I think that's a trap. I'm a big believer in sort of non-operatic performance. I like to keep things really real. And that way fictional characters feel like truthful characters. So the direction I would give, I don't think I've ever given direction to someone who was playing a fictional character it's any different that I would have given to someone if they were playing someone who was real by that same name. Now, that's different if you're playing the Joker, right? It's different if you're playing Superman. Then it's of course going to be pushed because the whole fun of it is the theater. But for the most part, those aren't going to be the parts that you're going to be offered or that you're going to be competing for. So for me, I try to keep it really real.
Billy, thanks. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for caring about actors and writers and directors who are outside of the coast and that are in the middle of the country trying to do their thing in the flyover area. You know, I just really appreciate your heart for that and your integrity.
Thank you. Look, people helped me on my way up. You know, when I was in my early 20s and writing and not selling, and you know, I needed people around me who would not only read for me and give me honest criticism, but encourage me and say, look, you're talented. It's going to happen. Just keep going. That's fuel. But it's no less true at 33, 43, 53, or 83, right? You still need it. And I'm happy to do it. You know, anybody who wants to do good work, I applaud them.
All right, we're going to be continuing to watch your name. Now everybody knows the name of a screenwriter and a director. And they can actually watch for a writer's work instead of just actors. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Appreciate it.
Go out and have a great day. Get some work done.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.